think a lot of students come to Vanderbilt really with a lot of really good ideas about leadership, but like less sense of like, how do I execute? Like, what do I do? What happens when we have difficult people? So would you say that in this case that there are difficult people that sort of need to be dealt with? Yeah. And so part of what we're going to talk about is motivation, and part of what we're going to talk about is sort of building on the actions. So like, what do I actually do? So I have a theory of motivation, that's one thing, but then how do I actually act it out?
We build leaders at Owen by fostering an environment where students can really find their own leadership style. And that really happens in three ways. Of course, in the classroom, there is a strong intellectual basis for leadership, but that's not enough. We have to be able to provide strong experiential elements. We do that from the day the students walk in the leadership development program, where students assess their own capabilities and build self-awareness with a coach. And then, of course, we give them the opportunities to lead, whether it be running a conference, running a student group, a club. I mean, leadership is a contact sport. It really is something you just have to get in and start doing.
So you have these three nice young astronauts. They're up there. We see some problems. And then we have this sort of, mission control, bunch of experts down there. And this is actually the real mission control from that time. Why did they turn off the radio? And so one problem we have is if we lecture this stuff, people just say, they sit back and they nod, yeah, whatever. And then, but when we put them in a situation where they have to practice it, they haven't practiced, right? And so it's something to know, and it's another thing to practice.
In class, we will use very specific, real-world situations, sometimes historical, sometimes more current, where there are real visceral disagreements at points in time between management and employees about the right course of action for the organization. Does anyone think this is complete and ridiculous coddling of these people who took an unprecedented action?
In the course of the class, there's an opportunity for students to actually say what they would do. So let me ask you this question. What can you do about it? And so often we think like we have this sort of inner script, this is what I would say, this is what I would say, but then when the microphone hits us, it's like, oh, what do I say?
I'm going to give you all a little time to think about this. We're going to talk to the surgeons. Why don't we turn off the radio?
Oh, well, they should have done X, Y, or Z. You should make people accountable. But that in and of itself is meaningless. How do you translate that into a specific conversation you're having with somebody? What are the things that you would say to manage this incredibly difficult situation? How can you move them in a more constructive direction? And it puts people on the spot. This is a tough situation. They're feeling so frustrated. They come back on. You're the manager. You're the leader here. How do you manage this situation?
Most classes have some team component in there. That team part is very unique to Owen. That I think there are a lot of schools where it's about me, myself, and I, whereas at Owen we're really trying to produce students with the skills to be able to be collaborative, to be able to be productive with other people. That requires a lot of leadership. And if you think about how organizations in the real world operate, it's becoming more that way. It's more team-based, it's more self-managed. People expect you to be able to pull a set of people together and get something done without being told, okay, first do this, and then do this, and then do that, and then do this.
So this is just a set of tools that you can use to size up any work environment.
I understood that to be able to get out into the workplace, it was critical to start managing teams. And I was exposed to that right away when I was in leading teams and organizations, one of the courses you take in the first quarter of business school.
And I think it means that we take leadership seriously, and we also take teamwork seriously, and we want to give students right up front a laboratory for doing both. And we want them to have those skills early because that's something that's going to carry through all their coursework regardless of their concentration. Plus we have the whole leadership development program where people are going to be able to take a real deep dive into self.
One of the things that we've learned in research that really drives long-term leader success is your ability to be self-aware. You've got to be flexible, you've got to be adaptable, you've got to deal with change, you've got to lead change. There's a lot of that is common across all industries. And I think the companies recognize that when they come here to recruit our students. All the tools we use, whether it's executive coaching, whether it's Hogan, whether it's the Voices 360, all those tools are tools used in industry and typically reserved for high potentials within an organization, so maybe 10% of an organization's population, and our students get access to it now. You hear me talk a lot about leadership development, really trying to help students think about their MBA experience as a lab. And so it's a safe opportunity to get in and practice and build and try and test and push out of your comfort zone. And there are plenty of opportunities by which they can do that in this environment, whether it's club leadership, whether it's case competitions, whether it's conferences.
It's called school leadership opportunities. We have all these clubs for people to be part of. We have lots of committees. We have lots of places where people can actually practice leadership.
Whether that be the healthcare club, the operations club, the music industry club.
And a lot of the programs also have a number of immersion type experiences too, where they can get out in the world and try these things out.
So right now I'm serving as Executive Vice President of the Owen Student Government, which means that I'm constantly managing teams that include about 35 club presidents that we have here, as well as different executive board members. We have club leaders, we have a really broad network of the leaders at Owen here, so if you guys do have questions.
Whatever it is, there are just plenty of opportunities, and if the one doesn't exist, they can build it. They can create it in this environment.
Because of our size, more than anything I see, we have a huge opportunity to really nurture good leaders. Because either from student government or clubs or in your classroom or in teams, you really can be an agent of change.
I think legitimately everyone here cares about the student's growth and development. Whether it's professor, whether it's administration, whether it's staff, whether it's peers.
We build leaders, but we build leaders without huge egos. What companies are looking for are quiet leadership skills that really influence others around them and change organizations.
Our leading teams and organization classes tend to range between 32 and 36 or so, whereas if you go to many other top business schools, you're getting that same content in classrooms of 98 students.
We have that constant FaceTime with faculty, with staff, with a leadership development team. Like, a lot of schools don't have that.
Leadership is very personal. I'm able to know my students a lot better than I know my colleagues are at peer schools because of that size and that scale, and I really get to understand them as individuals. So I can actually help give guided, relevant feedback based on the fact that I know them as individuals.
It used to be, and it still is at some B schools, that it's very cutthroat, very competitive, and it's never been that way at Owen. It's always had a strong focus on group work and succeeding as a team.
We're a school that really, at the end of the day, really pushes leaders out there who are trusted leaders, right? It's part of the from my standpoint, looking at it, thinking about the personality of the school.
It's also the way this whole program has been structured, right? You can't hide here.
Right.
So the student isn't just going off and leading and hope it works well. They're in an environment where they're getting feedback from their coaches, feedback from peers that allow them to really perfect their own style.
If we don't learn it now, there's so much more at stake when you go to the real world and really try to test different styles or different ways of working, when here you can do it and it's relatively safe and you can be coached through that path.
One of the key measures of business schools is success around that first job. The first job is important, but not nearly as important as the second and third job and the fourth job.
People realize, like, wow, like, okay, now I get it. Now I understand how this plays out. It's not really just theoretical, or it's not just a low-stakes class exercise anymore. Now it actually mattered. People begin to see the power of this stuff.
In business school, we can teach you all kinds of techniques, technology, ideas. You can learn to be the greatest accountant, the greatest marketer, the greatest analyst. But without leadership, you're never really going to leave that cubicle.